Welcome everyone to our second deployment week adventure. So this is Tyke Deployment Week deploying on AWS. And I am Matt Tanner. I'm a product evangelist and developer advocate here at Tyke. And I'll actually be walking you through this today. And by the end of this, you should have a working instance of Tyke on AWS if you are looking to follow along. We'll also send out a recording of this, so if you don't have all the pieces in place, you can go through it later and get to it then. So what will we cover today? Well, today we're going to cover a little bit about Tyke components. So if you're not super familiar with what a regular Tyke installation looks like, we're going to go over that. And if you're not familiar with Tyke features, we're going to go over some of those too. So some may be familiar with it, and some you may see some new features that we've added as well. Then we're going to go over what tyk-pro-docker demo is and just go over a brief explanation of it and why we're going to use it. Then we'll go over the prerequisites for you to actually do this through your local system and through AWS. Then we'll go on to actually show you how to do it. And lastly, I'll give a quick little overview of some next steps if you wanted to actually bring Tyke into production from your POC that we will be going over today. So first off, we're going to look at what are the components of a Tyke installation. And it's relatively simple. And what we'll actually be focusing on is going to be everything within this box, but specifically, we're going to be focusing on the stuff within this here. So let me just go over the stuff that we're not going to worry about first. Internet is just going to be those incoming client requests or access into the Tyke portal and dashboard. So we don't need to worry too much about these components. This is stuff that you can figure out later. Origin services, this is the stuff that the Tyke gateway is actually going to proxy into. So your upstream APIs, so the ones that you've actually built. Now, the first thing and the most important part of the Tyke installation is this portion here. So this Tyke API gateway, and that's where the heavy lifting is done. All of the features that I'm going to talk to you about, all of those are implemented there. So all of the guts of the actual operation are within those gateways. The next concern is Redis. So Redis is a component that we use in order to temporarily store configuration data and analytics data while the gateways are actually working. So Redis, very, very high speed, very lightweight, and that's why we use it. The next part is Pump. So Tyke Pump is another piece of this architecture that actually takes data from Redis and it pumps it through into MongoDB. And the purpose of that is because MongoDB is where we actually do our long-term analytics storage. And then you have this last piece here, which is the Tyke dashboard and portal. And that there is where it's a UI and you can do configuration of the gateway. Pretty much configuration of the entire platform itself can be done there, as well as exposing a developer self-service portal. And we'll go more into that as well. Next, we'll look at the features of Tyke. And the power of Tyke really is within its diverse feature set. And our features are supposed to help you build APIs quicker, make configuration more easy, and support much easier as well. And we believe that our product really does help you to do that. And here's a few of the features that help you to configure, support, and build APIs more easily. First, authentication and authorization. So if you're using Tyke or you want to use Tyke, chances are you've already thought about this. You're able to take away that responsibility from your actual service code. So if you're building an API, you can take that and you can move that into Tyke. And Tyke allows you to configure all of that authentication and authorization right within it. Then we have virtual endpoints, which are endpoints that don't have a backend. So you basically can create an endpoint on the gateway, and then your users can then hit that endpoint. You don't need to worry about backend services or an upstream API. Then we have endpoint mocking. So if you're a front-end developer, you know how painstaking it is to get backend mocks up and running. And as a backend developer, you know how much of a pain it is to hear from the front-end team asking for those integration mocks. So why not just build that right on the gateway itself? So you could put some mock responses right on the gateway itself, and tie those into what will eventually be your production endpoints. And then you can just, once you have the code generated on the back end, you can just flip that switch and it'll go from mock into your production code. So no more last minute integrations. You can get those integrations done right off the bat. Then we have rate limiting quotas, kind of a staple of API management. So, requests per second, and then you have your quota, which is going to be a longer limit based on a longer time span, whether it be a week, a month, or a year. Then we have request and response transformations. You can do, basically, you're able to transform request and response bodies and headers without any code. And we use Golang templates in order to do that. Very, very simple and easy to do. We do have quite a bit of content on that as well if you're interested. Then we have API versioning, which is Major.Minor.Patch made simple. So you're able to version APIs in a few clicks. Analytics and reporting, again, leveraging that MongoDB storage component that we talked about, where you're able to pull in these analytics and create reports that support and manage your APIs. The developer portal is here as well, that I also mentioned, where you're able to allow developers to self-serve, so they don't have to come to you in order to get access to your APIs. They can go right into the developer portal if you decide to expose it. Then we have GraphQL functionality as well. We won't be touching on this today, but again, we do have monthly webinars going over this, and we have a fair amount of content on our site showing you how you can use Tyk within the actual dashboard itself to create some GraphQL APIs by using your existing REST or GraphQL services and stitching those together using our universal data graph. Or you can actually just, if you have existing GraphQL services, you can use the gateway to also secure those, and all that great API management stuff can be brought into your GraphQL portfolio as well. All right, now with that out of the way, let's take a look at the meat of today, which is we're going to be using this tyk-pro-docker demo. So what is it and why are we using it? Well, all tyk-pro-docker demo is, it's a Docker compose containing all the tyk dependencies that you're going to need. And there's a few reasons why we use it here. So we use it because it only requires a single server to run on, so it's very easy to get up and running. And again, because it's easy to get up and running, it's quick and a great way to get POC stuff up and running. Our recommended approach for getting started with Tyk and exploring its features is to use tyk-pro-docker demo, and that's the first stop we usually tell potential users to go to try it out. So let's actually look at what we will need to do that. Yesterday, we talked about on local. We will have a recording for that as well. And there's a few more prerequisites for local, but here, all you need is two things. You need an active AWS account, and why do you need that? Well, we got to create the server in order to run tyk-pro-docker demo, and you need a terminal so that you can log into that server and configure it. So with those things on your system, let's actually move into the demo of how to do this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of my slideshow here. And I'm going to bring up my Chrome tab here, if I can get it over to my other screen. It's a little small because I'm running off an iPad here, so I apologize for that, but hopefully everyone is able to see easily. And let me bring up my instructions, because even though I've done this a million times, I always have to go over it again. So I'm just going to refresh this and make sure that I'm logged in. Should be. Okay, perfect. So when I come in here, I'm going to come over to my instances, And from there, launch instances. Now you could launch tyk on any of these platforms. The one that I'm going to pick is going to be Amazon Linux 2, and I'm going to pick a 64-bit. And for this, for our purposes today, I'm actually just going to use a T2 micro. You could go bigger or smaller, but for our purposes today, that T2 micro is going to be just fine. And for most purposes, as far as POC goes, likely it will be fine for that as well. I'm going to click Next, Configure Instance Details. And then I'm just going to come straight over to Configure Security Group. And what I'll do is I'm going to create a new security group, and I'm going to call it tyk open-POC. And I'll take this. And then what I'll do is this type here, I'm going to do all traffic. And you'll see that it's just going to be wide open. And that's also, we could actually list some IP addresses here, but we're just going to keep it completely open for the sake of this POC and to make sure it goes quickly. In production, you'd obviously want it to be much more locked down. The next step for me is to go to review and launch. Then we'll do a quick review here. I know everything's good. I'm going to click launch. Now we need our key pair. So I'm not going to choose an existing key pair. I'm going to create a new key pair. And I'm just going to call it, I'll just call it tyk key. And we'll do download key pair. I'm going to bring that into my downloads folder. We'll do tyk key, save that. Get this to give us some screen back. So we've got that saved. Now what we'll do is launch instances, and don't forget to save that private key file, or you'll have to create a new server. All right, so we launched that instance. Instances are now launching. What we'll do is, while that launches, I'm just going to take a quick look here. So we're going to go to view instances, and we can view launch log if we want to. And we can see that it was successful in doing this stuff. So now let's actually go to our EC2 instances. And now we see our instances running. Now I'm going to scroll across here, and I'm going to grab, in a moment, I'm going to grab this public IP. But first, I'm going to come over to this. We'll do clear. So we got a fresh thing here. Now I'm in downloads, and I'm going to stay in downloads because that's where I have my key file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this to log in to the server. And I'm going to make a mistake on purpose here, just in case you run across it. So you'll see that I'm going to need to do yourkey.pem, and I'm going to also need to plug in my public IP. Now I saved my key as, let me just bring it up here in my Finder, tyk-key PEM. So tyk-key PEM. And then if I come to the end here, I'm going to grab my public IP from here. If I can get to it, there we go. Come back over here, paste this. And I missed one. What did I miss? 3. Okay. And then let's try and log in. I'm going to say yes. Now you see I get this unprotected key file issue. And the quick way to fix this is to just run we're already in the folder. If you're not in the folder, you're going to want to be in the folder that your key is, or put the full path to it. But we'll do sudo chmod 600, and then we'll do tyk-key.pem. Add in my password here. Then that's going to open up the permissions for it. Then I'll try this again, and we should have no issue. And you can see that I'm now in that VM, that Amazon Linux 2 AMI there. We are logged in at this point. So first thing that we're going to do, now that we've logged in, we're going to update yum by doing this here. and we'll run that. Now, pending that everything goes well, we should be able to get done on time, but some of this stuff might take a few minutes to update. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not. So hopefully we can get through it quickly. And this will run, this might take a few moments to actually run through. And our next step is actually going to be to install Git. Once this is done, perfect. Now we're going to install Git. And the reason for that is we're going to need Git in order to pull down our Docker Compose from our tyk-pro-docker demo image. Okay, Git is now installed at this point. Now what we want to do is install Docker. And we're going to use Docker to run these containers in the Docker Compose. So we'll do that. It will pull down our dependencies for that. If you are running a different operating system, like right now we're running on Amazon Linux, we do have some other guides to show you how to do this with apt-get, and also how to make a few tweaks if you want it to run on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7. So our next step here is to actually start Docker up. And to do that, sudo service docker start. And Docker should be up and running at this point. Now I'm going to add my EC2 user, which is what I logged into this machine with. I'm going to add them to a user group for Docker. Then I'm going to actually just switch into the sudo user profile. So sudo su. Now, our next step at this point, we've got Docker installed, we've got Git installed. Our next step is to grab the Docker Compose, those dependencies, which we'll do using this command here. And we do have all these commands available through on our blog. You'll see that we have a bunch of different deployment guides. They are there, so don't worry about copying it too quickly. I'll also talk to Taylor about sending out these guides with our follow-up too. So you have the exact guide that I used to do it. So I'm going to curl that and bring down that dependency. And this may take a few moments here. There we go. Next step is, now that we have that dependency pulled down, we need to make it executable. And I'll use the chmod plus X, and I'll point to that Docker Compose dependency that we just pulled down. Now we should be executable. And lastly, I'm going to create a symlink for that Docker Compose as well. I'll do that using this right here. And after that, what we're going to do is now we're going to grab down that tyk-pro-docker demo repository that I had mentioned earlier. And to do that, we're going to do git clone with the URL to get that. So tyk technologies / tyk-pro-docker demo, and that's sitting on GitHub. Again, not too many worries about if you can't keep up with this right now. We will be sending out this guide later, and we also do have the same guides available on our website. So I'm going to run this, and that's going to pull down those files. Then I'm going to change into that directory. So we'll do cd tyk-pro-docker demo. Now I'm in that directory, and my next thing that I need to do is I'm actually going to bring this stack up. And this is how easy it is to do. We've pulled down tyk-pro-docker demo. Our next step is to just do docker compose up-d. And that's because we're already in the tyk-pro-docker demo directory. If we weren't, it's not going to work for us. So make sure you're in the right directory. We'll run this. And this is the one that may take a few minutes because it's going to actually have to pull down each of those images. Sometimes it runs fast, sometimes it runs slow. Now, what we'll do after this is up, and we'll check back in a moment, is we're actually going to navigate to our dashboard. And we're going to need to get our AWS instance IP, which is this one here. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to replace this. I had it typed before. I'm going to replace that with that. Now let's first make sure that this is finished. It might still be going. Okay. At the end here, what you want to see is creating all these dependencies. So Redis, Mongo, Gateway, Dashboard, Pump. And you want to see done in green throughout all of them. And that should mean that things have come up correctly. Now let's test that and see if we can hit the dashboard. And you'll see that I come to this that says unlicensed dashboard. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a key that I have already generated. Now, if you don't have a key, you can do the sign up now here, and that's going to allow you to get a key, a sample key. Or if you already have one, but you need to renew, you can also renew your license here as well. I'm going to copy my key, bring that over here, paste it. There is a way that you will see in some of our walkthroughs that talk about adding the key into tyk-analytics.conf, and you can totally do that. I just find that this is just slightly easier to do instead of having to go in and edit that text. I'm going to click activate key, and that means the key's been accepted. Now I can start setting up this dashboard in a process we call bootstrapping. So we'll do tyk, organization slug is tyk, matt@tyk.io is my email. So do Matt, Tanner, password, you can put whatever you'd like. I use that, check off the terms and conditions, and then if I can, let me just get that out of the way. I'm going to click bootstrap. And this may take a moment to bootstrap that. And what we'll do next after this is done loading is we're going to create an API, and then we're going to hit it just to make sure that we can show that all of the components are correctly talking to each other. So what should happen is, and now we're in the dashboard. So what should happen is this, I'm going to click APIs, say never, click APIs, and you'll see that I have no created APIs, but we're going to add a new one. So we'll do add new API. I'm going to call it test API. The type is REST, but you can also do TCP TLS, and you can also, as mentioned, do GraphQL here as well. Now our API listen path is going to be automatically populated, and target URL would normally be where we have our upstream API plugged in. Now I'm just going to take the default here, which is HTTP bin, and that is just a service that allows us to test these types of requests, just a simple testing service. So I'll do configure API. And our last step here, if you want to know more about the dashboard and the features, at this point, you'll be able to go to our docs and check it out. But our last feature here that we're going to just go over is just selecting the authentication mode and putting it to open keyless. And that means that I'm not going to need an authentication token or any type of token to access this API. And I'm going to click save. Now, if I go in here, you'll see that I have my API set up on /. You'll see that I have it set up on /test API. And I'm going to open up Postman, which I have here. I'll open up a new tab. And we'll do HTTP://. And then I need to grab, if I can bring it up here, I'm going to grab my public IP once again. So let me just copy this. There we go. Switch back over to Postman, paste that in, and hit port 8080. So obviously before, what we were doing was we were hitting port 3000 in the browser, and that's because that is the port that the dashboard is set up on. And if I come back here for a moment, we have test API. So /test API. Do that right here, test API. do send. So at this point, we know that this is working correctly. And this is the response that we're getting. We're getting back this just HTML payload in the body. So I'm going to just flip back actually over to the presentation, because at this point now you can actually start exploring some of those type features. But let's just go over what happened, just so you know. I'm going to come back here and do slideshow, play from current slide, and we'll bring this back up. So what happened was we went into the tyk dashboard and we added an endpoint, and that endpoint then gets added into the gateway. Now from Postman, which is this internet portion, it went to the gateway with that request, and that then went through to the origin services, grabbed that response from HTTP bin, brought it back, and then back to us in Postman. Now, when we hit that, there also would have been some analytics data brought into Redis through TykePump into MongoDB, and in our dashboard and portal, you can also view those analytics there as well. So that pretty much full circle shows us exactly what has happened. Now, let me skip ahead here to my last slide as we cap this off with our 2 minutes we have left. So what's our next steps? If now let's say you've followed along, you've got this up and running, what's your next steps? Well, at this point, you can start to develop a little POC, and with that, you'd start to explore features. So you'd explore those features of Tyke, and we have them nicely documented in all of our documentation. We have some guides in our blog. All of these things you can start to actually use and see how they fit into your architecture and your projects. Then you can start to integrate your APIs. And at that point, you're not going to use stuff like HTTP bin. You're going to go directly to your services. Then you're going to test. And likely you'll do this in development. You'll do this in maybe your integration environment, QA environment, all these environments, test to make sure that it works. And then the last step is going to be that move to production. And the move to production usually is a little more complex. And that's why we use this tyk-pro-docker demo, because it's all on one machine. There's lots of different ways that you can set this up in production. And we do have some documentation on it. And Travis and I are actually working on a guide to help folks out with some ideas on the best ways to move into production and some of those standard ways of doing it. So that is our presentation and our walkthrough for today. So if you do have any questions that come up later, definitely feel free to contact myself, Travis, or anyone else at Tyke, and we'll be happy to help you out and assist you. Take care, everyone.